Today we are going to begin our study of Siddhartha Gautama, which is the Buddha and Buddhism as a whole. Here's one of my favorite quotes, which I think most people can understand. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Buddha has a lot of great quotes, and hopefully you get something out of today's discussion. So Buddhism. What is Buddhism? It's a philosophy that's trying to change the way we look at life so that we have enlightenment or awakening, basically a different insight about what life is about. By changing your point of view, you can determine whether or not you're going to suffer in your thoughts or whether or not you're going to find calm and peacefulness. And on the bottom right, you have a quote from the Dalai Lama. He was actually on the previous slide. He's the leader of Tibetan Buddhism today. People take different roads seeking fulfillment and happiness. Just because they're not on your road does not mean they are lost. There are a lot of misconceptions about Buddhism, and we're going to talk about that today. When we talk about the end is insight. Now, it's not meaning like insight as if we can see it, but the end is insight. And what's insight? Deep understanding, observation. And really what Buddhism is about is just changing your insights about life. Biggest misconceptions. Buddha is not a god. He was just a guy who meditated and became quote-unquote enlightened, and then he was living a contented life, and he became a teacher. He's not a god at all. They don't even have gods. There's nothing that is worshipped, nothing that is worshipped in the Buddhist philosophy. It's more of a state of mind. And Buddha isn't a fat guy. Different statues of Buddha show up, and some of them have a big, fat, smiling Buddha. Buddha was probably himself really skinny, like 60, 70, 80 pounds at one point. He definitely is not a fat guy. This is Jack Cornfield. He's my favorite Buddhist teacher. He's still alive. He teaches in California. And as he said, Buddhist teachings are not a religion. They're science of the mind. I truly feel, there's a lot of people who are Christians and Jews who actually are Buddhists as well because they're not mutually exclusive. It's a different way of looking at life. And on the right, you see one of my couple of favorite quotes. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The waves is what life does. Life's going to throw at you what it wants. Life's going to do what life's going to do. It doesn't ask your permission. You have to learn to surf. You have to learn to deal with these things. You need to accept the good with the bad. And so Buddhist teachings are really about ways of doing this. So if you look at sort of where Buddhism falls, you've got almost 500 million Buddhist followers around the world, mostly in Asia, but obviously you do have a growing group of Buddhists across Europe and America as well. Mahayana Buddhism. There's actually two types of Buddhism. The first type is Theravada, which is more for like people who are going to be in a Buddhist monastery all day long studying. Mahayana is the great vehicle, meaning it's open to new influences. It tries to get as many people involved as possible. It has different forms. That's spread throughout Asia. It's Buddhism for the masses, so it's basically a little more easy to accept. You don't have to be a monk in order to get this. The goal of Buddhism is to not just individual escape from the wheel of samsara, but help all of humanity. The wheel of samsara is rebirth, is reincarnation over and over and over. And the goal is that you can not only help yourself, but you can help others. There's a phrase, bodhisattva is someone who is an enlightened being who comes back and tries to help others. There's actually a famous song by a band, Steely Dan, called Bodhisattva. It's just the idea of Buddhism. It's not just about you individually helping yourself, but maybe all of humanity. So the Buddha, his actual name is Siddhartha Gautama. This is before Christ. It's a philosophy that was started in India. Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, and he was spoiled. He lived in luxury. He was literally, up until the age of 29, he was in his own palace, the palaces of his family, and he never stepped foot outside. He did not need to. He didn't know about suffering because he had such a great life. Now what happened was, at the age of 29, he goes outside the palace for the first time. He is shown on the right side in the back. The chariot driver is bringing him, and what Buddha saw shocked him. First he saw somebody old, as you see in the top left, and he asked his driver, wow, what happened to him? And his driver let him know that this is going to happen to everybody. And then he saw someone dying of disease, and then he saw someone dying. They have a funeral pyre, which is burning the body. And then he saw people just suffering in general. And what Buddha realized is everybody is going to suffer these fates. Buddha didn't know. Everything was perfect in his world within the palace. But his driver lets him know and inspires him, could we come up with some sort of a solution to the problems of life? Because these things, old age, disease, death, suffering, everyone has them as part of life. How can we get beyond these things? So, at this point, Buddha leaves the palace, leaves his riches, leaves his family, and for 7 years he travels looking for the truth, whatever that might be. He studies the Hindu scriptures, the Vedas. They don't do anything for him or do enough for him. Then he tries meditation, Raja meditation, which is the eight-limbed path, and that wasn't enough for him. Then he became an ascetic. An ascetic is somebody who renounces all pleasures and like food. He was eating 1 grain of rice a day, the story goes. But still, nothing happened. Nothing, no answer came. No cure for the suffering of the world came to him. Finally, he decided that, you know what, starving myself isn't it. And what we do, which is just material pleasures, isn't it. We have to find, or he felt, you have to find a middle way. You might remember earlier in the year, Aristotle talked about the golden mean. Buddha said, between two extremes, we should take a lifestyle of moderation in the middle, which obviously makes sense. So what is the middle way? 2 extremes to be avoided. Hedonism, which is pursuit of pleasure all of the time, and asceticism, which is renouncing all pleasure. Those 2 extremes, in his opinion, weren't going to get you where you needed to get to. The middle way kind of leaves you with more of a peace of mind. And he felt ultimately that this middle path can be followed. And the Buddha liked lots of lists. And I think if I was teaching a class where kids had to take notes and take a test, you'd be annoyed at the number of lists. But he said there's an 8-fold path, and we'll get to it, that if you follow these 8 things, that's the goal, to follow down the middle path and to have a right life. So the enlightenment of the Buddha. A lot of these pictures, by the way, are from an artist named Alex Gray. If you can see in the very, very bottom of the tree, the Buddha is meditating under the Bodhi tree, it was called, the tree of wisdom. He sat there and meditated. The story goes for 49 days he meditated. Is that true? I don't know. Is that likely? Probably not. But for 49 days, the story, he meditated, and finally, all of a sudden, he awakens. I don't really like the idea of enlightened, because enlightened kind of has a light bulb on your head, like everything's just amazing, and like angels are singing. Awakening is just waking up to how the world really is. And in that moment, he appears to have achieved nirvana. Nirvana meaning, I love this quote on the top right. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Kids misinterpret what that means. It's kind of saying when the kids quiet down, the teacher will teach. That's not what it's saying. It's saying when you as a student put the antenna up and you realize everything and everyone is a teacher, then the teacher will appear. You can learn from the failings. You can learn from the positive things. That's what that means. Now, the word nirvana we referenced earlier, that's what Buddha had reached, apparently. Nirvana means to blow out, meaning to get rid of or extinguish all of those things that burn within us, our greed, our hatred, our misunderstanding, which is delusion. And nirvana is when you awaken, when you realize just how life is. This is what life is. You understand the truth instead of living the illusion that most people do. And when you have this truth, then you can find tranquility and peace within it. And the rest of his life, I love this about the Buddha. He just became a teacher, and he tried to teach what he knew, and he was very clear to tell people, find out for yourself if this is true, because not every truth is going to be true for every person. I like saying in my class, it's like a buffet, take what you like. But Buddha, I think he was probably right about most things. But see for yourself. Maybe you're going to be like, wow, I like Buddhism. Or maybe it doesn't work for you. So what was the main thing that the Buddha realized was the cause of all of our suffering? Now, by the way, that picture on the left is it's one of the fat smiling Buddhas in different parts of Asia. The fundamental cause of all suffering. Well, before I give you the answer, I'll put this little Far Side cartoon up. Somehow, the high priest knew that life on Contemplation Island would never be the same. So if you look on the left, you see a bunch of, Contemplation Island. They're high priests. They're monks. They've been living on Contemplation Island, meaning where they're going to think. Are they going to be able to think quite as well now that there are females with curves on the island? And so maybe you'll be able to realize, I've mentioned it earlier in the year, he said the cause of all suffering is desire. Now, is it possible to get rid of desire? No, it's not. Is it possible to realize that desire causes all of your suffering? Yes, it is. And then maybe you realize some things are causing more suffering than the need to, and you desire them less. His first teaching was called the Four Noble Truths, four main points that he realized while he was trying to meditate that they're the central teachings of all of Buddhism. The first noble truth, fact, there is suffering in the world. To live is to suffer. If you're alive, you're going to suffer. Sorry, it's not rainbows and buttercups and fairy tales. And you know what? Things are going to go wrong. People, for some reason, think that suffering is unusual. And we look at the person who suffers or the person who's limping or the person who's sick, and we think maybe, not in a bad way, kind of like sucks to be them, like terrible that that's their life. Guess what? If you've been alive, you will suffer. As soon as you were born, suffering will result, either through your mind or through sickness or through old age or through death. This is a wicked negative view, or it's a really true view. And once you accept it, and accept that to live is to suffer, perhaps then you won't suffer as much when it's your turn. The second noble truth, the cause of our suffering is our self-centered desires and attachments. Now, you're going to have a desire to control things. Everybody does. That's why they're miserable, because they can't control other people. They can't control life. You're going to desire to get what you want. You want life to be a certain way. You want certain assets. You have a desire to avoid things you don't like anger and fear. You have desire to have life go the way we want. This is probably one of the most important ones. If you really think about it, all the suffering we have, even physical pain. If I have physical pain, that hurts, but I suffer when I wish I did not have physical pain. The Buddha realized if you can minimize your desire or your attachments is holding on to things. When everything changes, it's hard to hold on. If you could reduce these things, life would be a lot better. Ultimately, it's refusing to accept what is. I've shown the PowerPoint slide numerous times of the two ways of looking at life. On one hand, look at the way the world is. On the other hand, look at the way you wish it was. If you're suffering, you're looking at the hand you wish it was. It's the lack of acceptance. Here's a story. There once was a stone cutter, and he was working under the stone all day long with his pickaxe, hitting the mountain. And then next door, he saw the rich man, and he thought to himself, I am a strong pickaxe stone worker with big biceps, but I wish maybe I could be the rich man and have all the greatness. And just like that, he became rich Leonardo DiCaprio. And he was enjoying life. And everything was great. He had his riches. And then he saw the king walk by. And not only did the king have riches, but the king was beloved. And the rich Leonardo DiCaprio thought to himself, I wish I could be the king. And just like that, he became the king. And now he's being carried around by all of his subjects and everybody loves him. But the king is getting a little hot in the sun. And the sun is burning him. And the king thinks, I have all the power in the world, but the sun is more powerful than me. Look, I'm getting burned. I wish I was the... And just like that, he became the sun. Nothing's more powerful than the sun. The sun is the birth of life, basically chlorophyll and whatever. And then the sun is all powerful, and then a cloud showed up and started blocking out the sun, and the sun thought to itself, what the heck? I wish I was the cloud. And just like that, he became the cloud. The cloud is unstoppable. It can block the sun. It could... And then the wind came and blew the clouds away. And the cloud, of course, thought, wow, the wind is more powerful. I wish I was just like that. He became the wind. The wind can blow trees and blow sun and blow kings and blow Leonardo DiCaprio around. And then hold up. The wind can't blow the mountain. And the wind thought it was all powerful. And then it can't move the mountain. And the wind thinks, well, the mountain must be more powerful than me. I wish I would. And just like that, he became the mountain. And nothing can stop the mountain. The mountain is ultimately the most powerful thing. And then the mountain felt the stone cutter. And of course, the stone cutter cut the mountain. Now, if you realize how long it took to make that last slide, you would pity me. What is that supposed to mean? The stone cutter learns, if he shifts his perspective, he could maybe find happiness in the situation. I use the example, we look across the street and we can always think, I want to be there, the grass is always greener, I want more money or better friends or better looks, I want less rain, I want. This desire to have things be different. The stonecutter wanted to be the rich Leonardo DiCaprio, but in the cycle I showed, it all came back to him. In the process of wanting something, when we really desire something, we lose focus of everything else. Our focus is so much on the one thing we want, we forget what we already have. And then we end up falling into a hole, and it's really hard to get out of that hole. Some people never get out of that hole. They just are always stuck in desiring the next thing, desiring the next thing. Almost, I apologize for the crass example, like a materialist junkie fix, something I buy today that makes me happy today until tomorrow. That desire, you forget what you have, and it's something else going on there. You never see the daylight of the present of what you have, because no matter what, things could always be better. And you know what? They could be. They often say, don't let Don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect. Did I say that right? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you're trying to be perfect, you're going to be miserable. Being good is kind of good as well. And so ultimately, appreciating what you have, the desire is why you suffer. Mindfulness is simply being aware of what is happening right now without wishing it were different. I know it's hard. Enjoying the pleasant without holding on when it changes, which it will, and being with the unpleasant without fearing it will always be this way, which it won't. Life's going to do what life's going to do. Our acceptance of it, going back to Seneca and being the dog running against the chariot, causes us to create more suffering. Today, I will live in the moment, unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case I will eat a cookie. It's easy to stay in the moment when you're playing basketball or with your friends or the boyfriend or playing guitar. It's easy to enjoy that and stay sort of mindful, because you enjoy it. The problem is all of the other times you're not enjoying it. Can you stay in the present? Ram Dass quote, "Awareness is like a large lens that takes in everything, all sensory inputs. When desire begins to creep in, it closes that lens off to one concept. I want that, I want that, I want that. All else is closed off." The third noble truth, the solution is to eliminate desire and attachments. Well, this is a lot easier said than done, the Western cop-out will usually say, and I don't disagree with that. It's really hard to give up our desire. It's an inconvenient truth. It's not saying to give up your desire, it's saying that if you really examine where your suffering comes from, it's coming from your desire. So, if you can stop being so attached to way the things you wish they were, if you can stop trying to grasp or hold on to things that are changing, that's how you would basically, if not eliminate, minimize your desires. I think that's the goal for most American kids listening to this. And the fourth noble goal, if you really want to reach the pinnacle of their philosophy, which is nirvana. Nirvana, as I said, is to extinguish a lot of the ways we look at the world. There's a specific thing you should follow. They call it the Eightfold Path. They're pretty common sense. I mean, you can look them up. Right speech, saying things like only things you should be saying are positive things, not lying, being truthful. And so if you were to follow these four noble truths and try to minimize your grasping, clinging, desiring mind, you will have a better life. That is the general belief of the Buddha. Here is the example of the Eightfold Path in more detail. I mean, for instance, like, let me see, right livelihood. There was a period of time when I was very invested in the stock market, and at one point I began to feel a little bit guilty that I was making lots of money off a cigarette company, thinking that literally I'm profiting off of people using a product that's going to ultimately probably create medical problems for them. And so I basically sold that stock, even though it was making me money, because that's not the right way to go about living, so to speak. And so the Buddha, as I said, had lots of lists. Here's a Buddhist cheat sheet. We're not going to go through all of these, but I mean, obviously you could take a look at it. You could dig a little deeper if you want. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the lists of the Buddha, which are a little bit relevant and might help some of you. First, the three poisons. According to the Buddha, the causes of suffering are caused by three poisons that we all face. The first one is delusion or ignorance. Now, a lot of people, if you're called ignorant, that means you're stupid. Delusion meaning that you're almost an illusion. You are confused. You will not be punished for your anger. You'll be punished by your anger. There's some way that we just misunderstand. Like, think about the last time you got in a big argument with somebody you really like or really love. Maybe it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, a parent. The way you try to win the argument and make yourself feel better is by getting angry at the other person and yelling things at them, trying to hurt them. That doesn't make sense. How is that going to make anything better? Most people can't forgive. They hold on to something that happened many years ago, and then they suffer for it. They're punished by it. That is the delusion. We are not thinking about things in the correct manner. According to the Buddha, as we said, delusion and ignorance, that's something we're trying to change this year, get you to realize how the mind works. The second thing is aversion, hatred, and fear. We are generally motivated by these factors. We've talked about it in regards to school and, the carrot or the stick. Most people are motivated more by fear of not being good enough. Most people meditate to seek inner peace, not revenge. We tend to have a long list of people who've wronged us, and that bitterness, that not being able to forgive, that hatred, or even more so, pushing away the aversion of not wanting certain things to happen when in fact they're going to happen because they're part of life. Like, for instance, getting older or having people pass away. Those are things that happen. When we fear them, we're creating more suffering. It's like a poison, that fear of what's inevitable. A constant aversion, which means the fear of pushing away, is saying, I don't want that, I don't want that. And in saying so, that's how we suffer. We suffer when we have the actual aversion, and then if we get the thing we don't want, we suffer again. We got to accept what is. I said this a lot a couple of years ago. You better build a boat. The storm is coming. Building the boat means getting your mind right, getting rid of the delusion and ignorance, realizing that the way perhaps you've been thinking is increasing the misery and suffering in your life. It's not always the events. And in fact, Buddhism and a lot of the Eastern philosophy would say it's not the events at all. It's how you interpret the events. If you build the boat, then when the storm comes, the bad thing, you'll be ready. A lot of the fear comes from an ignorance that we don't realize how life is going to work out. I told the story the other day about the farmer with the horse that ran away, and then the wild horses came back, and then his son broke his leg, and his annoying next-door neighbor, representing the egoic mind, kept saying, oh, that's so lucky, oh, that's so unlucky. And the farmer would always say, you'll never know, we'll see. A lot of times we fear things that when we actually go through them, they actually become the sandpaper of life. They become the things that shape us into something that's perhaps better. The things we don't want sometimes are the biggest vehicles for our growth. I had a kid write a journal and said, yeah, this all makes sense, and maybe after the fact you can look back on the terrible event and realize that it was fierce grace, something that made you better. But you can't do it in the moment. And I ask, why not? Why can't you realize, wow, when I'm going through hell, I have to keep going. This is shaping me. This is changing me. Instead of getting into a different way of looking at life. Every experience, no matter how bad it seems, holds within it a blessing of some kind. The goal is to find it. It's hard. And some things are so terrible that it's almost wrong to say I'm growing because of this, or there's a blessing in this. But as a student said, everything's either a blessing or a lesson. And that's an example of like grandma wisdom. And the grandma wisdom is the sort of stuff that definitely holds truth. The final example of the three poisons is the grasping and attachment. Now, the second part of the Four Noble Truths, talking about desire causes all of our suffering, it's as much the grasping and attachment of our minds. So when we're attached to the way we want things to be, and then we begin comparing it against how things really is, that's why we suffer. And I've said this so many times, and most kids just let it go one ear and out the other. But I'll say this again, if Buddhism is science of the mind, the main concept is looking at how you're looking. Are you ignorant and looking at the world the wrong way? So the grasping and clinging mind, it's unfortunate. The mind is obviously great, and the ability to look into the past and reflect has benefits, but we tend to get stuck in all of those negative things, our views and opinions. We get stuck to our ego. A lot of kids have trouble when I begin doing the smashing of the ego concept in class because we're so attached to how I think about it. And that's always reinforced by our long list of things we want and we don't want. If you could just accept what is and not hold grudges. I have one kid this year who doesn't hold grudges. I think everybody else I've ever had holds a grudge. Their mind clings to how it should have been. To hold on to the past always creates suffering, even if it was wonderful. I had a great student a few years ago said, in the springtime when you start getting that smell and that feeling in the warmth, for a day or two I feel great because it reminds me of my father who passed away, and then after a day or two I begin to get sad because I begin to miss him. And that's the concept, that even thinking back into the past, even though it can be good, it could also be bad, and something about our mind, we tend to bring back the negative memories more than the positive ones. The attachment to the beliefs is the greatest shackle. To be free is to know that one does not know. We've said this from Socrates right on through the year. 3 marks of existence. Impermanence and change. This is a big one. This was a big one for me, and even though it makes sense, I think it's a big one for everyone. The idea of impermanence is central to the whole Buddhist concept. Nothing is permanent. Everything is always changing. We've done this earlier in the year with Heraclitus. We're going to do it with Taoism. Things are going to show up and then they're going to disappear. The problem is we don't want that to happen. We want what we want and we want it to stay forever. And so that's where we get the clinging mind. That's where we grasp and try to make things permanent. It's not going to last. Everything will change. That's central to the teaching. So if you don't recognize that things like your assets, they're going to break, they're going to get old. Your reputation, your relationships, your health, your looks, your age, everything's impermanent. So the analogy I often use is from Jack Cornfield. When life is pulling the rope out of your hands, you can either go with the rope or you can create rope burn. Rope burn meaning you're trying to hold on to what's no longer true. That's us creating our own suffering. We create the rope burn. And then I'll get an egoic-minded kid saying, yeah, but you can't accept everything. Some things you have to fight against. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule. But most of the time when life changes, we don't really have a choice. When the bad thing happened, it's happened. Our grasping, clinging mind that will not let go of the rope is why we're suffering. So if you truly understand how change and impermanence works, you don't get so stuck on expectations. You don't get so stuck on things that change. Now, nobody wants to lose a job or have someone die or have a relationship end. Nobody does. But the idea is perhaps there's new openings. Not always in some of the examples. But the idea is maybe change, rather than fighting against it, it's maybe a possibility for us to smoothly begin to use the sandpaper of life of change and become better because of it. Change is never easy, but when we cling to a world that doesn't change, that's ignorance. Everything's changing. That's how we suffer. The wisdom of insecurity. This is the ability to flow with the changes, to see everything as a process of change, to relax with the uncertainty. The key word there is to relax with the uncertainty. I brought up this before, the wisdom of insecurity. People who have anxiety want to know what tomorrow is like. They want to plan it out. They want to be prepared for it. You can't be prepared for the future. It's impossible. You can try to, and sometimes you're going to be correct. But if you just prepare to the future saying, I don't know what's going to happen, and you begin to relax with whatever happens, I'll deal with it, that's a way to move past the ignorance, to just want the world to cooperate with you all of the time. Second mark of existence is suffering. The 8 worldly winds is a big concept in Buddhism. Praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and sorrow, fame and disgrace. Does anybody not have these? Now, this is a Jack Cornfield line, and you see they kind of work in pairs. We're going to have praise sometimes, and sometimes we're going to have blame. They call them the 8 worldly winds because as they work in a pair, one will come and then the other will come. So I color-coded it for you. Should we desire one over another? Well, obviously people are going to desiring the ones on the left in yellow and not want the ones in right in red. But the problem is we're going to get all of them at different times. If you become too attached or too excited about getting the things on the left. If you're just powered by success and praise and pleasure, you're going to set yourself up for failure, because the 8 worldly winds change. They're going to shift. That's the key concept. You need to find a balance. I don't do that well with compliments, and I don't really listen to them, and I also don't listen that much to criticisms. I hear both of them, but I understand that they're just worldly winds. Things are going to be good, things are going to be bad. I try to rest in the middle of it. The middle way, as the Buddha taught. As Buddha said, they come and go like the wind, rest like a giant tree in the midst of it all. So if I'm blamed for something, I hear it, I feel it, but I don't get stuck in it, and I don't fear it if it were to show up. I accept that the winds of life will change. The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. I had a student the other day write a journal, and in the journal they said, you keep teaching about all these philosophers, but when are you going to deal with a philosopher who actually tries to fix the problem? All these other philosophers are just trying to basically ignore the problem, but where's a philosopher who's going to help us get out of all of the pain we feel? And the concept is, on a deep level, we're causing the pain by how we're looking at what happens. Most people, especially in the Western world, we accept that our moods are caused by what happens externally around us. While I can't stop the bad thing that happened, you can't stop the bad thing that happened. We can't control the external. We can control the internal. We can control how we think. And so we have been covering philosophers who tell you how to fix the problems, because they tell you how to fix you. So those that suffer the most are usually the ones who are so stuck in how they think life should be a certain way. We've talked about the preconceived notion so often that most people begin to resist it, but you either adapt to what happens or you fail. You can't have life be exactly the way you want it to be, or you're going to, most of the time, not be that excited with what happens. If you don't adapt, you're going to suffer. You need to be able to bend, otherwise you're going to break. And now we move on to Buddha's 2 darts. I've given this story before in class, but I think it's worthwhile to hear it again. He said that all of the suffering in life comes from 2 darts. A dart is in something that's thrown at you. The first dart is somebody does something to you. Someone says something hurtful, somebody hits you, you put your hand on a hot stove, you feel pain, and this dart is real. It's something that has happened. It's part of being alive. He said this only makes up 1% of the pain we'll ever face. 1% of the suffering we'll ever face will be caused by the external world. He said that 99% of your pain is going to be caused by the second dart. And what's the second dart? It's how we cause prolonged suffering. So if you put your hand in the hot stove and then you pull your hand off, you're like, oh, that hurts. That's the first dart. And then if you begin thinking about how stupid you are and clumsy, you're such an idiot, and you think about this day after day, that's the 99%. The external event caused you to create 99% of your pain with how you think of it. So guilt, regret, the wall that people don't realize is you with how you're thinking are causing the pain. If you were to think differently, you wouldn't have as much pain in terms of suffering. Even worse, most of the time, second darts show up when there's no first dart around. Somebody said that I was stupid or fat or short 25 years ago, and I'm still remembering it. If you're always worried and getting bothered about things that haven't happened yet, or you get wicked self-conscious and think that everybody's talking bad about you, ultimately, you are doing the throwing of the second dart every minute of your life. I often like to say when you think other people are judging you, it's just you judging yourself. It's you with a non-stop second dart. And our final slide, happiness does not depend on what you have or who you are. It solely relies on what you think. So the concept, just to restate, the science of Buddhism is realizing what role we play in our emotional well-being. So write a journal, and tomorrow we will wrap up our discussion of Buddhism.